The Young and the Restless spoilers. The storm that had begun with Nick's reckless punch at the Shadow Room had grown into something darker, deeper, and far more personal. Genoa City had seen scandals before, infidelity, deceit, betrayal, but nothing prepared anyone for what came next. The revelation that Mitch Bacall might not only be connected to Matt Clark but might be Matt himself had already shaken the Newman family. Yet it was what followed, the emotional implosion of Noah and Sienna's fragile relationship, that tore through the family like wildfire. What started as whispers and suspicions soon became an all-consuming nightmare when Matt, who had been lurking in the periphery, discovered something that changed everything. He had been listening, quietly, methodically, as Sienna and Noah's private world unraveled. He heard every sob, every confession, every word that would later become a weapon. When Sienna broke down in Noah's arms, trembling and terrified, confessing that she was pregnant, Matt's mind fractured into 1,000 shards of rage. For months, he had believed that Sienna was playing both sides, that she had been sent to manipulate him, to exploit his identity, to lure him back into the web of the Newmans. But hearing her confess love for Noah, hearing her whisper that name with trembling devotion, ignited something primal in him. It wasn't just jealousy, it was annihilation. To Matt, love was not affection, it was control, possession, domination. And now, realizing that the woman he thought he had ensnared loved someone else, he saw betrayal where there had once been obsession. It didn't matter whether the child she carried was real or not, in his mind, it was a declaration of war. Sienna, meanwhile, had no idea that she had just doomed herself. Her tears were genuine, her confession raw. She loved Noah, not the way young women love recklessly, but with the fragile desperation of someone who had already lost too much. The news of her pregnancy had come as both a miracle and a curse. She hadn't planned it. She hadn't even known how to tell him. The fear that he wouldn't believe her, that he would see it as another manipulation in the endless Newman drama, broke her in ways that even she didn't understand. Noah, standing before her, was caught between hope and doubt. His love for Sienna was real, but his world had been poisoned by deceit. In Genoa City, every truth had a price, and every confession could be a trap. When Matt overheard their conversation, something inside him shifted. The calm, calculating mask he had worn for months began to crack. He realized that Sienna had chosen Noah, not him, and that her heart, and possibly her unborn child, belonged to a Newman. To him, that was intolerable. The Newmans had taken everything from him once before, his identity, his life, his peace, and now they had taken love too. The line between vengeance and madness vanished. Matt no longer wanted justice. He wanted destruction. Every Newman who had ever hurt him would pay, and Noah would be first. Sharon and Nick, still reeling from their own storm of revelations, were blindsided when they learned of the pregnancy. For them, it was not just a scandal, it was a catastrophe. Sharon, ever the protector, feared history was repeating itself. She saw in Noah the same reckless impulse that had once driven Nick, a need to love deeply, even if it meant self-destruction. Nick, on the other hand, was paralyzed by guilt. His own violent outburst had set off a chain reaction that now threatened to consume his family. Every instinct told him to fix it, to fight, but the situation was already beyond repair. The shadows of Mitch, Matt, and the Bacall mystery had merged into something monstrous, something that no one could stop. Noah's uncertainty grew by the hour. He wanted to believe Sienna, to see the purity in her tears, but doubt gnawed at him. Was the pregnancy real, or another ploy to secure his trust? The timing was too perfect, the emotions too raw. In a family where love and lies intertwined seamlessly, truth was the rarest currency. Sharon tried to reassure him, but she was haunted by her own past with Matt Clark, a man who had once deceived her, violated her, and nearly destroyed her life. If Matt truly had returned, hiding under a new identity as Mitch Bacall, then this entire situation might have been orchestrated. A revenge so elaborate that even the unborn child could be part of his game. But what Matt didn't understand was that Sienna's love was not something he could manipulate. For the first time in her life, She had found someone who saw her as more than a pawn in Genoa City's endless wars. Noah had believed in her when no one else did, and though his belief now wavered, her heart remained with him. That sincerity only deepened Matt's rage. He began stalking them, leaving no trace but a lingering feeling of being watched. He listened to their calls, intercepted their messages, studied their routines. Each piece of information became another step in the revenge he was planning. As days passed, tension turned to terror. Sharon's intuition told her that something catastrophic was approaching. She confided in Nick, who was torn between disbelief and dread. He knew Matt Clark was dangerous, but the idea that he had returned under another name, that he had infiltrated their lives again, seemed too cruel to be true. And yet, every sign pointed to it. Mitch Bacall had vanished from Los Angeles police custody after Nick's assault. No one could find him. Reports surfaced of anonymous phone calls to Sienna, distorted voices whispering threats she couldn't trace. The walls were closing in. Noah tried to protect her, but his mistrust made him clumsy. He questioned her constantly, demanded proof of the pregnancy, asked for things she couldn't give. The more he doubted her, the more distant she became, until their love was hanging by a thread. It was exactly what Matt wanted, to destroy them from within before striking from the outside. He fed on their fear, watching from afar as they crumbled. Every tear Sienna shed, every argument they had, was a victory to him. Then came the night everything shattered. Sharon received a call, static, faint breathing, and then a man's voice saying her name. She froze. It was a voice she had heard in nightmares, one that had haunted her since the day she thought Matt Clark had died. He was alive, and now he wanted her to know it. The police traced the call to an abandoned warehouse outside Genoa City, and when Nick and Noah arrived, they found signs of struggle. Sienna's scarf lay on the floor, blood on the concrete, but no body. The child she carried, if it was real, was now a symbol of everything Matt wanted to destroy: innocence, love, and the Newman legacy. The days that followed were chaos. Sharon refused to eat or sleep, Nick spiraled into guilt and fury, and Noah descended into despair. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to lose everything without ever knowing what was true. The media devoured the story: the missing woman, the cursed Newman family, the mysterious return of a man thought dead. Victor, from his tower of silence, refused to intervene, though his investigators worked tirelessly behind the scenes. To him, it was another test of blood. Another trial that would separate the weak from the strong. But in the quiet moments between the chaos, Sharon began to see the pattern. Matt's actions weren't random. He wasn't after money or fame. He wanted emotional devastation. He wanted every Newman to suffer the way he had, to watch love turn into grief, to watch trust rot into suspicion. The pregnancy, real or fake, had been his trigger, the proof that the Newmans still had something pure left to lose. And so he had decided to take it from them. As the search for Sienna intensified, Noah's guilt grew unbearable. He blamed himself for everything: for doubting her, for failing to protect her, for loving her in the first place. Sharon tried to hold him together, but even she was unraveling. Each night she saw Matt's face in her dreams, smirking, whispering, reminding her that evil never truly dies, it just changes its name. Nick, now hunted by his own conscience, vowed to end it once and for all, no matter the cost. But the cost was already too high. In the end, the truth about the pregnancy remained a mystery. Some said Sienna had fabricated it to keep Noah close. Others believed it was real, that she had been carrying the child of a Newman when she disappeared. But one thing was certain: Matt knew the truth. He had seen the test, heard the sobs, and understood the depth of her love. And that was why he hated Noah with every breath. Because in loving Sienna, Noah had stolen the one thing Matt could never possess. Redemption. The story was no longer about bloodlines or betrayals. It was about obsession and identity, about what happens when love turns into war. For Sharon and Nick, the fear of losing another generation consumed them. For Noah, The hope that Sienna might still be alive became both his salvation and his curse. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond Genoa City's glittering lights, Matt watched, patient and unrepentant, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Because to him, this wasn't over. It had only just begun. There are moments in Genoa City when time itself seems to fracture, when the weight of the past presses so hard against the present that no one can tell where one ends and the other begins. That moment came when the truth about Matt Clark finally surfaced, not as rumor or speculation, but as something painfully real. The man the Newmans had long believed to be gone had returned not as a ghost, but as a wounded, furious survivor. The world had treated him as a villain, but behind the fury lay something that almost resembled tragedy. For years, Matt had carried the scars of betrayal. The woman he had once called his wife had been unfaithful, her affair tearing apart what little humanity he had left. Love had curdled into vengeance, and vengeance had become the only thing keeping him alive. To him, the Newman family represented everything that had destroyed him. Power without conscience, affection without loyalty, and a lineage that devoured everyone it touched. But what made it worse, what turned his vengeance into obsession, was discovering that Noah Newman, the son of Sharon, the woman who had once rejected and exposed him, was now entangled in the same web of love and deceit that had once ruined him. To Matt, it was poetic justice. He saw in Noah a mirror of his younger self, naive, trusting, blinded by emotion. And he saw in Sienna the same kind of woman who had betrayed him long ago, beautiful, trembling, unpredictable, carrying secrets like invisible daggers. When he overheard her confession about the pregnancy, it wasn't disbelief that filled him. It was horror, not because she was pregnant, but because she had chosen to love the wrong man. Allie, the woman who had once stood by Noah through his darkest years, was gone. Their breakup had been quiet, unpublicized, but devastating. She had left because she could no longer fight the invisible ghosts that haunted their relationship, Noah's unresolved guilt, his inability to stay still, his constant need to fix things that weren't his to fix. In her eyes, he had inherited the Newman curse, the compulsion to save others even while destroying himself. Their love had been gentle but fragile, built on the idea that two broken souls could heal each other. But when Sienna came into his orbit, Allie saw the pattern repeating, a new woman, a new secret, a new spiral into chaos. She left before it consumed her too. And now, as Sienna's pregnancy became public knowledge, Allie's name faded into whispers, a ghost of the life Noah had lost before this one began. Nick, ever the reluctant peacekeeper, tried to step into the storm. He had seen what vengeance did to men like Matt, how it hollowed them out, how it fed on pain until nothing was left but destruction. Nick believed that if he could talk to Matt, he could stop the cycle before it devoured another generation. He went to him not as an enemy but as a father, hoping to reason, to explain, to plead. He told him that Noah was young, that he didn't understand the gravity of what he was doing, that perhaps all of this could still be undone. But Matt's eyes, cold and distant, betrayed no trace of compassion. He saw in Nick's attempt at diplomacy the same arrogance Victor had always carried, the belief that words and money could fix what they had broken. To Matt, every Newman was the same, a liar, a manipulator, a destroyer of innocence. What Nick didn't realize was that Sharon had already made her own move. She knew better than anyone what Matt was capable of. She remembered the darkness in his eyes, the way he twisted truth into weaponry, the way he found joy in fear. And when she heard that Nick was going to meet him, she followed, unable to sit quietly while history repeated itself. The confrontation that followed would mark one of the most haunting nights in Genoa City's history. The air in the abandoned warehouse where Matt had taken refuge was heavy with dust and old secrets. When Nick arrived, he tried to talk, calm, rational, controlled. He told Matt that revenge wouldn't bring back what he'd lost, that punishing Noah wouldn't erase the betrayal that had shattered his marriage. But Matt, standing beneath a flickering light, smiled in a way that chilled Nick to the bone. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted recognition. He wanted someone, anyone, to admit that what had been done to him was wrong. He wanted Sharon to look him in the eye and say that she understood. And as if summoned by the weight of his demand, Sharon appeared. Her presence froze the room. For years, she had carried the guilt of surviving him, of walking away from his madness, of testifying against him, of believing she could ever truly escape his shadow. But now, seeing him again, she realized that nothing about him had changed. The hatred was still there, festering and alive. She stepped between him and Nick, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. When Matt moved closer, spewing accusations, Sharon did the only thing she could: she struck him. The slap echoed through the empty space like the closing of a door between the past and the present. It wasn't an act of violence, it was defiance, a declaration that she would no longer be afraid. But the slap had consequences. Matt's fury erupted. In his mind, Sharon had humiliated him again, just as she had years ago, and this time, there would be no escape for her or her family. He swore that Noah would feel everything he had once felt: betrayal, loss, despair. He would take from him not just love, but legacy. Sienna's pregnancy became his weapon. If the child existed, he would ensure the world never knew who the father was. If it was a lie, he would turn it into a truth that would destroy the Newmans from within. The battle between Noah and Matt was no longer just emotional, it was existential. Noah, torn between disbelief and guilt, couldn't escape the sense that he had caused all of this. The more he tried to protect Sienna, the more she withdrew into herself, haunted by fear and confusion. Was she carrying his child, or had Matt somehow twisted her reality until she no longer knew what was true? Sharon tried to hold them together, but every night she felt the walls closing in. Nick, now desperate to protect both his son and the fragile line between justice and chaos, began to understand what his father had meant all those years about control, that sometimes, to save what you love, you have to sacrifice your own peace. As the days turned into weeks, Genoa City became a stage for a tragedy no one could stop. Rumors spread of Matt being seen near Newman Tower, of anonymous letters left on Sharon's doorstep, of photographs mailed to Nick showing Sienna in places she'd never been. The line between reality and manipulation blurred. Some said the pregnancy was real but that the child was gone. Others whispered that Sienna was never pregnant at all, that it was all part of Matt's psychological warfare, a delusion planted in her mind to keep her bound to Noah, to keep the Newmans suffering. In the midst of it all, Sharon began to see the true nature of Matt's obsession. It was never about love or even revenge. It was about control, about rewriting the story of his life through theirs. If he couldn't have happiness, no one else would. She realized then that the only way to stop him was not through reason or force, but through exposure. The truth had to be brought into the light, no matter how ugly it was. But as she prepared to confront him one final time, something unexpected happened. Sienna collapsed. The stress, the fear, the endless games had taken their toll. At the hospital, doctors confirmed the pregnancy had been real, but the child was gone, lost before it ever had a chance to live. The news broke Noah completely. He sat beside her hospital bed, silent, hollow, unable to process the loss. For him, the baby had been hope, proof that love could still exist in a family built on lies. Now, even that was gone. Sharon wept silently in the hallway, while Nick stood beside her, unable to offer comfort. They had all been so consumed with fighting the past that they had destroyed the future. Matt disappeared after that. Some said he fled the country. Others claimed he was seen near the lake, staring into the water as if it might give him back what he'd lost. But no one truly knew. What remained was the wreckage, a family once again fractured by secrets and pain. Noah would never be the same. Sienna, when she finally awoke, could barely look at him. The love that had once bound them was now tainted by death, deceit, and unspoken guilt. And yet, through it all, Sharon remained unbroken. She had faced Matt's darkness and survived again. The slap that had enraged him had also freed her, not from fear, but from the illusion that forgiveness could ever change men like him. Nick, watching his mother's resilience, finally understood what Victor had never taught him, that strength wasn't measured by control or dominance, but by the ability to endure heartbreak and still choose to protect the people you love. But the scars would never fade completely. Genoa City would whisper for years about the lost child, about the slap that started a war, about the night the past came back to claim the Newmans once again. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond their reach, Matt's name would linger, not as a man, but as a reminder that every lie, every betrayal, every forbidden secret eventually comes back to life.